So what we'll do next to keep things really simple at the moment is we'll just add a button at the bottom here so that we can click on a More button and load up, in this case, the next two activities. So what we'll do, we'll go back to VS Code, and once again I'll just clean up these windows. And this will take place in our activity dashboard. So let's open this. Now what we're doing currently is when our component mounts is we're using a React hook to load our activities. And we're going to keep this in place. We still want to load our initial activities when we mount this particular component. And what we also want to do is we want to bring in our new paging properties from our activity store. So let's add these to the destructured props, and we'll get the set page, the page, and the total pages from our activity store. And what we also want to do here is add some local state, so that we'll keep our loading initial indicator to say that we're loading our initial batch of activities, but we'll also add some local state so that we can track the loading of the next batch of activities. And what we'll do, we'll add a const, and we'll say loading next and set loading next equals use state, and we'll just set this to false initially. And then what we'll do is we'll add a handler so that we can load the next batch of events. And what we'll do is we'll add a const handle get next, we'll call this. And this will take no parameters, and what we'll do in here, we'll set the loading next indicator to true. We'll then set the page to the page plus 1 in our activity store, and then we can call our loading activities or our load activities method here, and then once this is completed we can turn off our loading indicator. So we'll say load activities dot len, and after this is complete we'll say set loading next and set this to false. And then what we'll do temporarily, we'll look at a different method very shortly, but for now we'll just add a button to allow the users to click and go and get the next activities. So just below the activity list, I'm just going to add a button and bring that in from Semantic UI. And our button, we'll just float it to the right, and we'll give it some content equal to more ... We'll make it positive. We'll give it an on-click event of handle get next, and the loading indicator we'll set to loading next. And we also want to make this button disabled if there's no more pages available to be returned from the server. So what we'll do is we'll set this to disabled, and we can set this to equal to total pages, and we'll just set this equal to page plus 1 so that if this particular value is equal to the total pages, then we know there's no more pages to go and get from our server. So let's just take a look at this and see if this is working. And if I go back to the browser, then we can see our More button, and not quite the effect that we're looking for because we've just reloaded the entire page. But what we do is, or what we do see, is we're now getting our next two activities. And if I click on More again, then we get the next two activities after that. So we've now got a list of 6 activities, and I should be able to click this again and we'll get the next 2 activities, which we do. And if I click this one more time, then we'll go and get the next 2 activities, and this button should become disabled. So I'll try this one more time, and we can see the button's disabled. There's no more activities to get from our server, and we've got all of them in the list. But we don't want the whole page to reload when we're clicking on this button, so let's just go and make a small adjustment. And we only want our initial loading to display if the loading initial is true and the page is equal to 0. And that will prevent the whole page from reloading every time. And if I go back and just take a look, what we should find now is that just our loading indicator is running and we go and get our activities. Cool. But it's not cool enough. We want to make this cooler. And one way to do that is to implement infinite scrolling so that the user doesn't have to go through the arduous task of clicking a button as they scroll down to see the next activities. So what we'll implement next is infinite scrolling and add that to our application.